The summer of 1941 burst into their lives not with the thunder of victories, but with the deafening roar of retreat. The war, which they called the Patriotic War, began for them not at the front, but in the depths of the Siberian forests. They did not take up arms to defend their homeland. They fled. 5 men, each with his own truth and his own fear, became deserters, dissolving into the endless taiga, while behind their backs, the world they had abandoned burned. Ivan walked first, a former sergeant, broad-shouldered and grim. He kept a firm pace, as if leading a detachment, although now it was not a formation, but 5 fugitives whose honor had been torn to pieces. His face did not flinch even when a branch snapped in the distance. Everyone turned, but he only clenched his fist, signaling for quiet. He was no hero, but his eyes held something more than just fear, despair and defiance. Behind him, Mikhail coughed. Every breath came out as a wheeze, his lips white. But he didn't complain, only walked, leaning on a long branch instead of a stick. His eyes were attentive, as if he was constantly calculating something in his head. How much food was left? Where the path led? How many steps until the next rest? There was no militancy in him, only a desire to survive, dictated by a weak body and a strong mind. Grigory moved easily, though his face was dark. He kept looking back, as if counting the others, as if each of them was a potential rival or a burden. His smile was crooked, his eyes cunning, always looking for an advantage. He could walk silently for hours, but his every gesture was suspicious. He was running not from fear for his homeland, but from fear for his own skin. Stepan walked beside him, constantly cracking jokes. "Wish we were baking sukari now instead of marching through mosquitoes," he grumbled. "Ivan, where are you dragging us? Maybe we've already circled the globe?" But his laughter quickly died down when the sergeant's gaze settled on him. His cowardice was hidden behind forced cheerfulness, but Ivan saw right through it. Alexei brought up the rear. He was only 20 and hadn't yet had time to understand what real life was before the war stripped him of all illusions. His face still retained a childish softness, though his eyes were frightened, exhausted. He often stumbled over roots but stubbornly got up and kept walking. Sometimes he would look up at them, as if hoping to see a sign that their flight had meaning, that all was not yet lost. "Much longer?" he exhaled. "Long," Ivan threw back shortly. They had been walking for the 3rd day. During the day, they hid in lowlands, under trees. At night, they pushed forward. Water was running low. Food was coming to an end. Everyone understood. There was no way back. The war was driving them not west, but deep into the wild, merciless taiga. By the evening of the 4th day, when the sun was almost touching the tops of the ancient pines, they came out into a small, slightly overgrown clearing. The air here was a little softer. Rare rays of light broke through the dense canopy, illuminating an old, lopsided hut. The chimney was half destroyed, and the roof was half overgrown with moss, but it seemed people had lived here recently. Near the hut, by a thick-hewn log, a girl was chopping wood. Her movements were quick, precise, betraying a habit of hard labor. Her long, light brown hair was gathered in a tight braid. A few strands fell across her face, sticking to her sweaty forehead. She must have been 20 years old, no more. But her slender hands already knew the price of calluses. She heard the crunch of branches under their feet and froze. The axe, raised for a blow, hung in the air for a moment, and then fell to the ground with a dull thud. The girl's eyes, large and frightened, darted from one man to another, as if she was trying to comprehend this sudden vision. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, but a tremor ran through it, which she desperately tried to hide. Ivan stepped forward. His heavy boots sank deep into the soft earth. "People," he said softly, his gaze cold and appraising. The girl took a step back, pressing her hands to her chest. Her eyes narrowed. "You're lying," she said, and steel appeared in her voice. "I recognized you right away. Your tunics are dirty, but they're military. And only those running from the war hide in the woods. You're deserters." Grigory smirked. His lips stretched into an unpleasant grin. "Smart woman. Too smart." Her face turned white. She took another step back, instinctively seeking escape, but behind her was only the impassive wall of the taiga. "I'm Anna," she said after a long, painful pause, as if surrendering to fate. There was a village here, several homesteads. People in uniform came, rounded everyone up. The men for labor, the women too. I hid in the cellar. I was the only one left. I can't survive alone. Mikhail, leaning against the trunk of an old cedar, exhaled heavily. His eyes, usually wary, now looked at her with obvious pity. So, one of our own. A refugee from the war, too. Ivan was silent. He stood as if carved from stone. His gaze shifted between the frightened girl and his companions. In her eyes there was no malice, no desire to turn them in, only desperate longing and fear. And he understood that her appearance would change everything forever. The sun set, and the taiga was instantly plunged into gray twilight. The air became noticeably colder, chilling them to the bone after the hot day. Anna, having recovered from the initial shock, led the men to the old hut. Inside, it was dusty and smelled of dampness, but it was still a shelter. "There's a stove here," she said hollowly, pointing to a pile of stones and clay in the corner. "If we fix it, we can get warm." Ivan nodded. Without a word, he began to inspect the stove. His hands, accustomed to work, quickly assessed the damage. Stepan and Alexei, under his direction, began to gather dry branches and fallen logs for a fire. Grigory, however, openly inspected the hut. His gaze slid over the meager furnishings, as if looking for something valuable. While Ivan and Alexei fixed the stove and Stepan built a fire outside, Anna, like a hostess, brought a small cast-iron pot. "There are some potatoes, or dried goosefoot. That's all that's left." Grigory smirked, moving closer. "Thanks for that, woman. We were about ready to start chewing bark. But I see you're managing well here alone. You must have had a man. Where'd he go?" Anna flinched, her lips tightening. "None of your business," she snapped, but her voice trembled. "I had no man here. They exiled me here with my mother, like many others. Then the war and that was it. I was left alone." Mikhail, hearing this, managed to lift his head. "So you've been surviving just like us. Understood." Ivan, finished with the stove, went out to the fire. The flames were already cheerfully licking the dry branches, casting red highlights on their faces. He threw a heavy glance at Grigory, which made him quiet down. "Enough questioning," the sergeant said hoarsely. "The main thing now is food, and that we aren't found." While Anna peeled the potatoes, the men settled around the fire. Alexei, the youngest and most naive, watched the girl with curiosity. "Have you been here long? Alone? Aren't you scared? Animals all around." Anna raised her eyes. A shadow flickered in them. "It's scary every day, but what can you do? Nowhere to run, nowhere to go. The forest is big, but at least you can hide." Stepan, warming himself by the fire, perked up again. "Hey, woman, you seem handy. You probably know how to make soup. We could use a hostess like you." Grigory let out a short chuckle. "A hostess? What? We going to marry her? But there are 5 of us here. How will we share her?" The tension hung in the air, thick as the smoke from the fire. Ivan sharply raised his head. His eyes flashed in the firelight. He clenched his fists. "Shut up, Grigory." His voice was low and dangerous. "She is a human being, and we will not touch her. She will decide for herself." Anna, who had been peeling potatoes, dropped the knife. Her face turned pale. She looked up at them, her gaze frightened but already searching. Each of the men looked at her, and in each gaze, Ivan saw something more than just hunger. Mikhail, the quietest, suddenly spoke. His voice sounded surprisingly firm. "She didn't just stay here for nothing. She needs to live too. And it will be harder for us without her." Night thickened over the clearing, and with it, unspoken desires and dangerous thoughts. The hook, which they did not yet know about, was already tightening. The evening by the fire continued. The aroma of boiled potatoes with goosefoot filled the air, drowning out the smells of dampness and pine. Anna distributed a portion to each. Her movements were restrained, cautious. The men ate silently, hastily, as if afraid the food would disappear. Each one caught her gaze, trying to read something hidden behind her tired face. Ivan sat slightly apart. His eyes watched everyone attentively. He saw how Grigori looked at Anna with open greed, how Stepan tried to get her attention with some ridiculous joke, how the quiet Mikhail held his gaze on her longer than necessary, and he saw the fear in Alexei's eyes, who didn't seem to yet understand the full complexity of the situation. "So you've decided to stay here?" Anna asked quietly, when they put down their pots. Her voice sounded surprisingly serious. "What's next? How many of us are there like this in the forests? What if they find us?" Stepan shivered, although it was warm by the fire. "Don't jinx it, woman. No one will find us here. The taiga is vast." "They will find us," Ivan said hoarsely. "Or we will be found. You can't run from fate. But for now, we run, and we live." Mikhail, leaning on his knees, looked thoughtfully at the flame. "Life here is different. There are no laws, only the forest, and us, and our own rules." These words hung in the air, and Anna seemed to catch their hidden meaning. She looked at each of them in turn. Her gaze lingered on Ivan, then slid to Grigory. A mixture of despair and determination was in her eyes. "I understand," she said. Her voice was barely audible, but it held a firmness that wasn't there before. "I can't survive alone. And you? It will be hard for you without a woman too. To cook, to wash." Grigory grinned, his eyes lighting up. "And what are you offering, beauty? You'll be our servant." Ivan tensed, ready to put Grigory down at any moment. But Anna, surprising everyone, raised her head and looked directly at him. There was no submission in her gaze, only harsh necessity. "No," she said, and her voice strengthened. "Not as a servant. I know how to keep the peace between you, and how I can survive. I will be your wife, for all of you." A dead silence fell. The fire crackled, crickets chirped, but the men seemed turned to stone. Surprise, shock, and then something resembling a predatory glint flickered in their eyes. Alexei blinked in confusion. Mikhail took a deep breath. Stepan froze with his mouth half open. Only Ivan maintained his outward calm, but his jaw clenched. Anna stood straight, her face pale with tension, but resolute. She had made her choice, understanding its full weight. She had offered the only path she saw for survival. And no one knew then that this girl, Anna, would become their wife. All 5 of them at once. And that this very decision, dictated by despair and the struggle for survival, would forever change the fate of each of them. They had found not only a refuge in the taiga, but also in each other, a source of both salvation and inevitable doom. The morning in the hut was damp and cold, despite the warmth radiating from the stove, which Ivan had quickly put in order the day before. Anna's declaration from yesterday, like a thunderclap in the silence, had not yet aired out of the souls driven into the taiga. It had changed everything. The men woke up with a new, unspoken heaviness in their hearts, and in every glance cast at Anna, something different could now be read, a mixture of embarrassment, desire, and fear. Breakfast passed in a booming silence. Anna, pale but with resolutely pressed lips, poured the hot, slightly salty broth of goosefoot and dried mushrooms. Her movements were cautious. She avoided looking anyone directly in the eye. Ivan sat staring into his bowl. His harsh face was grim, but a storm raged within him. He heard the spoon tremble in Alexei's hand. He felt Grigory's predatory gaze fixed on Anna. This woman they had found in the taiga had become not just a companion, she had become a trap they had all fallen into together. After breakfast, as Anna began to clear the table, Ivan, surprising himself, broke the silence. "Anna," he said hoarsely without raising his head. "Why are you here? They didn't just round up the village for nothing. There's always a reason." Anna froze, her hands clutching a dirty rag. She slowly turned, and in her eyes read an old, deep pain. "A reason," she began quietly. "My father was a kulak. No, not like that. He was a hard worker. Bent his back his whole life so we would have bread. They were dekulakized, the family exiled here. Mother died last winter from consumption, and when the war started, they came for everyone who was here. But I hid in the cellar and watched them lead everyone away. My little brother, too. I was left alone. I wasn't running from the front. I was running from people, and from the emptiness." Her words, simple and bitter, hung in the air. The men were silent. Each of them felt the weight of her truth. Mikhail was the first to respond. His voice was hoarse but full of sincere sympathy. I understand. I had a family too. A wife, 2 children. I was a teacher in a school and then the summons. I didn't want to fight. I couldn't. I don't know how to kill. I know how to teach. When my unit was broken, I just walked in the other direction. I thought if I didn't kill, they would stay alive. Stupidity, of course. But I didn't go back, and I don't know what happened to them. Stepan scratched the back of his head. His usually cheerful face turned serious. And I got my povyazku, discharge, out his papers. I went to the military commissariat, and it was such chaos. They said, to the front, with no training, no nothing. I thought, they'll kill me right away there. And I have an old mother, alone, and I'm her only son. So I decided, I'd rather die here than there for no reason. I'm no hero. A coward, maybe, but alive for now. Grigory grunted, but his eyes held no trace of their usual mockery, only a dark weariness. And I fled the village. Same thing. We were supposed to turn over grain, and I had nothing to turn over. They called me a wrecker, almost jailed me. So I ran, fled from the authorities. This war isn't for me. I fight for myself. Alexei, the youngest, blushed, fidgeting with the hem of his tunic. And they took me right from the field. I hadn't even, with my fiancée. I promised I'd come back, and then it started. Such horror. Everyone killing everyone. I just ran, wherever my feet would take me. I wanted to go back, wanted to go to her, wanted everything to be like it was before. The men fell silent. Their brief confessions, torn out in that morning hour, were like wounds opened to the light. Anna nodded silently. She understood. Everyone had their own war, their own pain, but now they were united not only by the taiga, but by this shared, terrible brand of deserter. And she, their common wife, had become part of this drama. Ivan stood up, his gaze hardening. Enough of the past. Now we have one future. Here. Mikhail, Alexei, with me. We'll scout the surroundings and look for food. Grigory, Stepan, chop wood. We need a lot. Anna, you clean up the hut for now, fetch water. The familiar order, though shifted, still held. But now they knew a little more about each other, and this knowledge, like a thin thread, bound them, making their community even more fragile and dangerous. Several days passed. The deserters and Anna tried to establish a life in the deep taiga. Ivan, Mikhail, and Alexei went into the forest every day, scouting the area, setting snares, sometimes bringing back small game. Grigory and Stepan chopped wood, mended the hut's roof, trying to create some semblance of a home. Anna, as if accepting her new role, completely took over the household. Cooking, washing their battered tunics in the icy river, cleaning the hut. Her presence transformed their feral existence, but it also brought a new, hidden threat. Every evening they gathered by the fire. This was the time when the tension between them became almost palpable. The flames illuminated their faces, which showed not only fatigue but something else. Hidden desires, envy, jealousy. Tonight, Ivan returned with a catch, a young hare. Anna skillfully butchered it, and soon a pot of thick, fragrant stew hung over the fire. She ladled out the food, trying to be impartial, but every glance, every gesture did not escape the men's attention. When she handed a bowl to Mikhail, he, coughing habitually, said quietly, "Thank you, Anna. It's delicious. You have golden hands." Anna gave him a faint smile. This smile, simple and warm, did not escape Grigory. He sat opposite, his eyes flashing. "Golden, huh?" he grunted sharply. "I thought all hands were the same. What's so special about what she did? Skinned a hare? Any man could do that." Stepan, sensing the tension, tried to diffuse the situation. "Well, Grigory, you're wrong. A woman's hands, they're special, gentle, tender. Not like ours, all rough." Grigory shot him a dark look. "And what? Now everyone is going to stick up for her? Is she some kind of queen here? Or is she pleasing each of you separately?" Ivan, who had been eating silently, raised his head, his gaze fixed on Grigory, cold and warning. She is our wife, all of us, and we do not harm her. That is the law. The law? And who writes the law here? You, Sergeant? You're no commander here. We are all equal here. And if she's common, then her attention should be common too. Not smiles for one, and sideways glances for another. Anna, turning pale, set the pot on the ground. Her gaze darted from Grigory to Ivan. I try for everyone, she said quietly. I have no one to single out. You are all mine. Alexei, sitting next to Anna, timidly took her hand. She really does try for everyone. And you, Grigory, you're wrong to talk like that. Grigory jerked as if stung by a snake. He snapped his head back. What are you doing, pup? Get your hands off her. What? You need her more than anyone else. Ivan shot to his feet. The fire cast long shadows, distorting their faces. He stepped toward Grigory. His voice was low and threatening. I said, enough. One more word, and you'll be sleeping in the forest. Alone. The tension hung in the air. The men stared at each other, clenching their fists. Anna stood between them. Her face was twisted in fear. She realized that her attempt to keep the peace by becoming a wife to all had only spawned a new, more dangerous struggle. A struggle for her attention, for her favor, for the right to consider her his. Mikhail, watching all this, sighed heavily. He knew this was only the beginning. Such a situation could not last long. The days dragged on, weaving into weeks. The community, now with Anna at its center, settled its life in the taiga wilderness. The men, at first wary and embarrassed, gradually grew accustomed to her presence. But this familiarity only exposed new facets of their relationships. Anna knew how to do many things. She found edible herbs, knew where to look for mushrooms, skillfully cleaned the fish they caught. She was indispensable, and everyone understood that. But the more they valued her, the stronger the unhealthy possessiveness grew. Ivan noticed how everyone tried to spend more time alone with Anna, even under contrived pretexts. Alexei helped her carry water, finding surprisingly long routes for it. Mikhail brought her rare forest berries or a particularly beautiful flower. Stepan told her his simple jokes, trying to draw a smile. And Grigory just watched her. His gaze was openly hungry and appraising. One day, when Mikhail returned from fishing with a particularly rich catch, several large pike, he brought the biggest, still-flapping fish straight to Anna, who was sitting by the stream washing laundry. Here, Anna, the best one for you. I know you'll cook it better than anyone. He held out the fish to her, and his eyes showed an undisguised desire for her praise. Anna, smiling, accepted the catch. Thank you, Mikhail. You really are the best fisherman we have. At that moment, Grigory appeared. He emerged from behind the trees like a shadow. His eyes flashed when he saw Mikhail and Anna bent over the fish. What's going on here? The fish is for Anna, is it? And what are we supposed to do, starve? That's common catch, Mikhail. Not for your personal offering. He snatched the fish from Anna's hands, almost hitting her. Mikhail turned pale. His weak hands clenched into fists. I caught it. I decided, he wheezed, but his body trembled with helpless rage. Anna stepped between them. Her face was tense. Stop it! Her voice sounded surprisingly loud. What are you dividing? A fish? I am your wife. That means our joys and our sorrows are common. If Mikhail brought me the fish, it means I will cook it for everyone, not just for myself. Ivan, drawn by the noise, froze at the edge of the clearing. He saw the scene, saw how Anna was trying to extinguish the flame that he too felt in himself. He understood that her words were the only thing keeping them from open hostility. She's right. Ivan's voice boomed across the clearing, forcing Grigory to back down. Everything we have is common. Anna is common. If anyone forgets that, I'll remind them. Quickly. Grigory spat something through his teeth but obeyed. Mikhail lowered his eyes. His offense was visible, but he too remained silent. Anna, casting a weary look at them, took the fish and went to the hut to prepare dinner. She felt how, with each passing day, her role was becoming an increasingly heavy burden. She was their connecting link, their peace treaty. But this meant she constantly had to balance on the edge of their male ambitions and jealousies. And with each day, this balance became more dangerous. After the incident with the fish, the tension in the air became almost physically palpable. The men tried to avoid open conflicts in Ivan's presence, but their glances, gestures, even their tone of voice betrayed a growing animosity toward one another. Anna, sensing this unstable ground beneath her feet, tried to be equally attentive to all, but this only fueled the illusion in each of them that he was the special one, the main one for her. Alexei, the most naive, genuinely tried to help Anna with everything. He carried water, gathered wood, mended the old benches in the hut, always finding an excuse to be near. "Anna, maybe you need something else. I can go pick berries. There are plenty in the ravine." Ivan saw it. He saw how Alexei, just a boy yesterday, was turning into a man whose gaze now lingered too long on Anna. Mikhail, whose physical weakness contrasted more and more with his sharp mind, spent hours watching Anna. He would tell her stories from his teaching life, recite poems he remembered from memory. He didn't try to touch her, didn't make vulgar remarks, but there was something deep in his attention, almost proprietary. He believed he understood her better than the others, and this understanding gave him some invisible right to her. Stepan, whose jokes now almost exclusively touched on their family situation, tried to be cheerful, but his laughter sounded increasingly false. He constantly hovered around Anna, helping her with household chores. But each time his touches became a little longer, his glances a bit more overt. He was cowardly, but a fire burned in him too, fanned by jealousy. Grigory, however, did not hide his intentions. He pointedly stayed close to the hut when Anna was there, monitoring her every step, every conversation. His smirk had become even more predatory. He openly challenged Ivan when the latter tried to establish order. "What are you always standing over her for?" he snarled one day when Ivan interrupted his attempt to chat with Anna. "She's not your personal woman, Sergeant. Or did you decide everyone here is a fool, and you're the only master?" Ivan, gritting his teeth, answered coldly. "I am the master here as long as we haven't rotted, and Anna is our wife, everyone's. And as long as she is ours, you will behave like a human, not like an animal." They understood that this fragile peace would not last long. Each of them, looking at Anna, already saw in her not just a common wife, but his property. Each believed that he deserved her more than the others, that his right to her was the most important. The sense of ours was slowly but surely giving way to the greedy mine. Autumn was approaching. The nights grew longer. The taiga rustled more anxiously. In the distance they sometimes heard the barking of dogs, distant, muffled shots. These sounds reminded them of the war, of the outside world that had not forgotten them. But the most terrifying threat now was themselves. Autumn fully asserted its rights. The taiga was painted in crimson and gold, but its beauty was merely a backdrop for the escalating internal drama. If before the jealousy was hidden, now it burst out, like a festering sore. Anna's words about being a wife for all still acted as a kind of spell, but its power was weakening. The men snapped more often, argued over trifles, and the reason was almost always her. Domestic scenes that were once mundane now turned into battlefields. One morning, as Anna was hanging the washed laundry on a line near the hut, Alexei, wanting to help, brought her freshly cut steaks for support. He tried to be close. His naive desire to please Anna was obvious. "Anna, look here. See how strong they are," he said, handing her a smoothly planed stick. At that moment, Grigory appeared. As always, he wasted no time on pleasantries. "What are you doing, snot-nose, hanging around again?" he barked. "What, can't the woman hang laundry? Or are you waiting for her to pat you on the head? Get going, go chop wood. Men are working, and you're rubbing up against skirts here." Alexei flinched, his face covered in red blotches. He clenched his fists. "I'm helping. And what about you? Can you only yell?" Grigory took a step toward him. His eyes narrowed. I do my job. And you've clearly forgotten that the woman here is common, and nobody needs your little offerings." Ivan, returning from hunting, heard the noise and sighed heavily. He was tired of these constant squabbles. "Enough!" His voice cracked like a gunshot. "Grigory, to work. Alexei, you were told. Anna, get on with your business." He separated them, but his eyes showed a growing hopelessness. He saw that his authority increasingly had to be reinforced, not with words, but with threats. In the evening, at dinner, the level of tension did not subside. Anna, exhausted by their eternal strife, tried to be invisible, but the men wouldn't let her. Mikhail, usually quiet, spoke up when Grigory once again tried to take the best piece of fish from the common pot. "Grigory, have you lost all shame? This is for everyone, and you're always trying to snatch for yourself, as if it's your personal catch. Mine. And what are you, a saint? You yourself were bringing Anna the ripest berries yesterday. Thought no one saw. You think she'll give you something separate for that?" Anna raised her head. Her eyes burned with offense. "What are you saying? I am your wife, but that doesn't mean I'm a commodity that you divide. I'm trying for everyone so you can eat, so you can be warm." Stepan, trying to defuse the situation but only adding fuel to the fire, chuckled. "Well, Anna, you're right. Commodity or not, you're a fine woman, and such a hostess in the taiga. It's a gift of fate. If only you were just mine." Even slammed his fist on the table, making the mugs rattle. "Enough! I said enough! If you keep this up, I'll scatter all of you through the forest myself. We will not cut each other's throats here over her. I'm telling you." He stood up. His figure loomed over them, full of suppressed rage. The men quieted down, frightened by his anger. Anna looked at all of them, and in her eyes read not only despair, but a bitter realization. Her attempt to keep the peace had turned into a new, even more terrible war, but this time between themselves, and she was the cause of it. With each day, the illusion of equality among the men melted like snow in the spring sun. Now, each of them, regardless of Anna's words or Ivan's orders, began to internally consider himself the main husband. It showed in the little things: who sat closer to Anna at dinner, to whom she handed the first portion, to whom she smiled slightly longer. But from these little things, a new, suffocating reality was forming. Alexei, though the youngest, did not lag behind his elders. He tried to imitate Ivan in everything, but his attempts to be firm looked clumsy. One day, when Anna was sewing a torn-off button onto his tunic, he, emboldened, tried to put his arm around her shoulder. "Anna, you're so kind," he muttered. His face was burning. "If you were only mine, I would never hurt you." Anna pulled away. Her gaze was stern. "Alexei, what are you doing? We agreed. Don't forget yourself." But Alexei was already deaf. A foolish, naive obsession burned in his eyes. He saw himself as Anna's only true protector, her main husband, to whom she ought to belong. Mikhail, whose intelligence had previously set him apart from the group, now used his mind as a weapon. He recited poems to Anna, told her about the stars, trying to convince her of his uniqueness, that his soul was closer to hers. One day, he brought her a rare, beautiful flower, found in the deepest part of the forest. "Anna, this is for you," he whispered, when no one else was around. "This flower is like you, rare, beautiful. You are the only one like it here in the taiga. And I understand you better than they do. They are all crude, but I—" At that moment, Stepan appeared. His face was twisted in a grimace. He saw Mikhail giving her the flower, and his usually good-natured face darkened. "What kind of romance is this? A teacher, giving flowers? Is she some lady in your St. Petersburg? She's ours, common. No need for whispering here." Mikhail jumped up. His frail body trembled with anger. "What have you done, you fool? Why did you do that?" Stepan advanced on him menacingly. "Because there's no need to act like the only groom here. We are all men, and each has his right. I may be a coward, but not so much that I crush other people's flowers." A fight would have broken out if Ivan hadn't approached. His face was dark with fury. "Have you gone completely feral?" he roared, pulling them apart. "Over a flower! Have you forgotten where we are? Forgotten who is looking for us?" Anna looked at them. Her eyes were full of tears. "Stop! For God's sake, stop!" she pleaded. "I am your wife. All of you. Why can't you live in peace?" But her words no longer worked. Each of them heard only himself, his own voice, his own right. Each of them believed that he was Anna's true husband, and the others were just an obstacle. and this insane belief was pushing them further into the abyss. The taiga, their refuge, was becoming their prison. And Anna, not salvation, but the apple of discord that was about to lead to disaster. The tension in the air reached its peak. Every step, every word became a time bomb. The taiga, which had once seemed a refuge, now felt like a trap, and the hut like a cage where cornered animals were ready to tear each other apart. Anna, exhausted by the constant strife, moved as if in a dream, trying to be impartial. But her every glance, every smile, was perceived by the men as a personal preference. One evening, after a particularly unsuccessful hunt, when food was scarce and nerves were frayed, the men sat by the fire. Ivan was trying to fix a broken trap. Mikhail was reading an old, tattered book. Stepan grumbled under his breath, and Alexei, leaning against the wall, stared at the fire with a dead gaze. Grigory, the most aggressive, brought up the topic that gave them no peace. "Why are we silent like fish?" he began. His gaze slid over Anna, who was noiselessly ladling out the last of the soup. "Why so quiet, like beaten dogs? Or are you afraid to admit that everyone here thinks Anna is his?" Mikhail looked up from his book. His intelligent eyes burned with a cold fire. "And so what if we do, Grigory? You think you're the cleverest? You think you need her just to be the boss here? I, by the way, know what a family is. I had a wife and children left in the city when the bombs were falling. I ran. Not because I'm a coward, but because I couldn't watch everything I loved die. I wanted to preserve something human. And Anna, for me, she isn't a woman to be divided. She is a reminder of the life that still might be." Grigory spat contemptuously. "A reminder? What, teacher, have you gone completely mad? And what about meat? And for survival? I had no wife, no children. I had a village. I had land that was taken away. And then the war. They almost shot me in 37. I barely got out. And then to the front. I don't need your sentimentality. I need a woman so I don't croak out here. And I won't just give her up. I always take what's mine." Stepan, hearing this, suddenly darkened. His grumbling ceased. "You think you're the only one with a bitter life? They took my wife, Agrippina, when we didn't want to join the kolkhoz. Just took her, and that was it. Called her a kulak lover. And me? I'm nobody. And then the war. They wanted to put me in a penal battalion just for looking the wrong way. I ran. Where to? I don't know. I just wanted to live. And Anna, she reminds me of Agrippina. Alive. Not the one who rotted somewhere in the camps. I won't let her be harmed." Ivan, who had been silent until then, sharply raised his head. His eyes were full of not only anger, but a deep, terrible pain. "All of you, shut up," he roared. "You think I'm sitting here because I'm bored? My mother died of hunger in 22. My father was dekulakized in 31. I've been fighting my whole life. For whom? For what? I was ordered to go to my death, and I watched commanders abandon their own men. I almost killed my commander when he wanted to leave the wounded. I ran because I realized this war isn't mine. And Anna? Anna is the only thing still keeping us human. If any of you dares to hurt her, I will rip his throat out." His words hung in the air. It was the first time they spoke so openly about their past, about their wounds. This didn't bring them closer, but on the contrary, showed just how wounded each of them was, and how selfish their thirst for survival and possession of Anna was. Each saw in her not a woman, but his chance for redemption, for a new life, for lost happiness, and each was ready to kill for this chance. Anna, leaning against the wall of the izba, hut, listened to these confessions. There were no tears in her eyes, only emptiness. She understood that she had become not a unifying principle, but a catalyst for their inner demons. She was their last hope and, simultaneously, their sentence. And no one, not Ivan, nor anyone else could guarantee peace anymore. The morning was frosty, the air crackled with cold, and steam billowed from their mouths with every breath. A thin layer of the first snow lay on the ground, hiding the tracks with a thin white film. The men, shivering, gathered for another foray for provisions. The tension hung in the air, so thick it seemed about to explode. After yesterday's revelations, everyone looked at each other with even more suspicion. Ivan, as usual, assigned the roles. Grigory, Stepan, with me. We'll go further down the river. They say there were elk tracks there. Mikhail, Alexei, you stay with Anna. Check the traps we set yesterday, and don't go anywhere." He cast a stern glance at Grigory, who was already, as usual, trying to argue. "What, Sergeant, going into the forest alone again? Leaving us here with the chores? Maybe we don't trust you anymore? Maybe you want to claim Anna for yourself?" Ivan didn't answer. Only his hand slipped to the axe hanging at his belt. One look was more eloquent than 1,000 words. Grigory stepped back, but his eyes burned with malice. 3 hours later, when Ivan, Grigory, and Stepan had gone several versts deep into the forest, the silence of the taiga was torn apart by a sharp, piercing sound. "Barking!" Stepan whispered, his face instantly turning gray. "Dogs!" Ivan tensed. This was not the barking of wild animals, but the confident, guttural bark of trained hounds. He had heard it before, at the front. It meant only one thing. The NKVD was after them. "Quick, after me!" Ivan lunged forward, trying to get around the pursuit. "This isn't an animal. This is a hunt for men." They ran, sinking into the snow, tripping over roots. The barking grew closer. Commands were heard, and soon the first shots rang out. The trees around them splintered from bullets. "Snipers!" Ivan shouted. "Take cover!" They lay down behind a fallen trunk. In the distance, shadows appeared. 5 or 6 men in camouflage cloaks with rifles at the ready, and a pair of dogs, straining furiously at their leashes. "We're surrounded," Stepan whispered. His voice was shaking. "It's over. This is the end for us." Grigory looked around. His cunning eyes frantically searched for an exit. He saw a small gap to the side, where the fire wasn't reaching. And he made a decision. Instantly, like a predator. "I'll distract them," he shouted. But there was no heroism in his voice, only desperate calculation. "You guys get away." Without waiting for an answer, Grigory jumped up and dashed to the side, firing into the air from his nagant. It was a mad, desperate maneuver. The NKVD men reacted instantly, switching their fire to him. Machine guns chattered, bullets whistled. Grigory fell, but he had bought Ivan and Stepan a few precious seconds. "Run!" Ivan grabbed Stepan by the collar. "Faster!" They rushed deeper into the forest, away from the chase. Behind them, shots and shouts could still be heard. Stepan, running beside him, was pale as death. He was stumbling. His eyes were full of terror. "Grigory, he's dead. And if we want to live, shut up and run." Stepan, suddenly even more frightened, like a scared rabbit, darted to the side, veering off their path. I can't. I'll hide," he shouted, disappearing into the thicket. Ivan stopped. He could try to catch him, but it was suicide. The NKVD were too close. There was no time. He had to get back to Anna, to Mikhail and Alexei. He was alone. Making his way through the forest, he felt a cold terror pierce him. One of the 5. 2 were now dead. Or 1, he didn't know. Ivan ran, not minding the path. His lungs burned, his legs sank into the snow, but he felt no fatigue. Only one thought spun in his head. Anna, Mikhail, Alexei. What about them? The NKVD could have followed their trail too. An hour later, as the sun was already setting, he burst into the clearing near the izba. No smoke came from the chimney. The silence was ominous. No sounds, no barking dogs, no voices. Only the cold wind rustled in the dry branches. "Anna, Mikhail, Alexei," Ivan croaked. His voice broke. No one answered. He burst into the izba. Empty. The table was overturned, bowls scattered on the floor. There were no signs of a struggle, but no people either. A cold sweat broke out on Ivan. He ran outside, looking around. His gaze fell on the edge of the forest. There, under an old cedar, lay Anna, unconscious. Next to her was Mikhail. He was dead. His chest was pierced clean through. His eyes stared into the void. He was holding an old rusty axe in his hand, which he had apparently tried to use for defense. Ivan rushed to them. He knelt by Anna, checking her pulse. Thank God, alive, just unconscious. Blood was caked on her temple, a blow from a rifle butt. Next to Mikhail, his book lay in the snow, open to some page. He raised his head. Where was Alexei? His gaze darted to the traps. They were set near the stream, as ordered. And there, in one of the traps, a wolf was struggling. And nearby, pinned to a tree, was Alexei. His body was torn, his eyes wide with terror, his mouth stuffed with a rag gag, and on his chest a brand was burned, the brand of a deserter. Ivan felt the ground give way beneath him. The NKVD hadn't just caught them, they were playing. They showed that they knew who they were. He picked Anna up in his arms and carried her into the izba. He built a fire, hastily treated her wound. Her groan was the only sound in this hell. An hour later, when Anna came to, she looked at Ivan with eyes full of horror. "Alexei! Mikhail!" she whispered, and tears streamed down her cheeks. "They came. There were many of them. They caught Alexei first. He tried to run. Mikhail tried to protect me, but there were too many. They beat him, and then they shot him." She sobbed, grabbing his hand. They said they would find the others too and would torture them for everyone." Ivan gritted his teeth. He saw it all in her eyes and knew it wasn't that simple. The NKVD hadn't just killed. They had left a message. At that moment, a figure appeared in the doorway. Stepan, pale as a ghost, trembling. His clothes were torn, his face scratched. He hunched over, looking at Ivan and Anna. I saw how they caught me, tortured me, forced me to talk. I didn't say anything, Ivan, I swear, but they told me that if I didn't give you up, they would come for me again and do the same thing they did to Alexei." Ivan looked at Stepan, saying nothing. But where did the brand on Alexei come from then? And why did Stepan come back? His gaze was full of doubt. He understood. Stepan had betrayed them, but couldn't kill himself like Grigory, couldn't defend himself like Mikhail. He just ran, and then returned, like a beaten dog. The community. Their fragile world was destroyed. Of the 5 men, 2 remained, if Stepan could even be called a man, and Anna, and the terror that now settled in their hearts. 3 days after the NKVD attack passed in a heavy, oppressive silence. The izba, which had once seemed a refuge, now felt like a tomb. Mikhail and Alexei were buried at the edge of the forest. Their graves were marked with simple wooden crosses. The snow covered the ground, but it couldn't hide the horror of what had happened. Ivan sat by the stove, his face like stone. He hadn't slept for almost 3 full days. His eyes burned with a feverish fire. Anna lay on the bench, covered with an old sheepskin coat. Her wound on her temple ached, but the emotional pain was stronger than the physical. She had lost 2 men who, as best they could, had become close to her. And now only Ivan and Stepan remained. Stepan was hiding. He had wedged himself into a corner of the izba, not raising his head, avoiding Ivan's gaze. His pale face, trembling hands, and constantly pressed lips spoke for themselves. Ivan knew Stepan had betrayed them. He couldn't prove it, but he felt it with every fiber of his being. The barking of the dogs, the precise hit, the brand on Alexei. Everything pointed to the fact that information had been leaked. "Drink." Anna handed Ivan a mug of hot herbal broth. Her voice was weak, but a new, steely note had appeared in it. She was broken, but not defeated. Ivan took the mug without looking at her. "Why did you come back, Stepan?" His voice sounded hollow, cutting the silence. Stepan flinched, raised his head. There was animal fear in his eyes. "I couldn't. They tortured me, Ivan. Said that if I didn't talk, they'd come back for me. I didn't say anything, I swear. I just ran. And then, when they left, I was afraid to go anywhere else. So I came back." "You're lying." Ivan set the mug down. "They wouldn't have just let you go. You led them to us. Admit it." Stepan trembled even more. His body shrank into a ball. "No, not me. I swear." Anna sat up. Her gaze was fixed on Stepan. "They were talking about the brand," she said quietly. "On Alexei. And they also said they would find everyone and torture them for each one. Was it you who told them how many of us there were?" Stepan covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. He didn't answer, but his silence was louder than any words. Suddenly, Anna felt a sharp wave of nausea. She clutched her stomach. Her face turned even paler. Ivan rushed to her. "What is it? The wound?" She shook her head. "No, not the wound." Her gaze darted to Ivan, then to Stepan, who was watching her fearfully. "I think I'm pregnant." Her words, spoken in this gloomy izba, came as a complete shock. Stepan recoiled, his eyes wide. Ivan froze. His face expressed a mixture of disbelief and some wild primal astonishment. In this hell, amidst death and betrayal, a new life had begun, and none of them knew who the father was. There had been too many nights, too many men. This new life, this small unborn child, became not a symbol of hope, but a new, even more terrible apple of discord in their fading community. The news of Anna's pregnancy, like an exploded bomb, muffled all other horrors for a few moments. The silence in the izba was so thick you could hear the fire crackling in the stove. Ivan looked at Anna, and his harsh face contorted with confusion. Stepan, still cowering in the corner, looked like a beaten dog, and a spark of hope mixed with fear flashed in his eyes. Anna lay, pressing her hands to her stomach. Her gaze was empty. She was looking past them, into a future that was as misty and dangerous as the taiga itself. Stepan was the first to recover. He slowly crawled out of his corner. His trembling hands reached for Anna. It's my child," he whispered. His voice was full of desperate hope. I feel it. I was with you all the time, Anna. I know. It's mine." Ivan lunged forward. His eyes blazed with rage. "Shut up, Stepan. What are you talking about? What yours? You who betrayed us, you who ran away." But Stepan, as if crazed, wasn't listening. His eyes reflected all the pain of his past, all his losses, all his fears. Mine. You see, I had Agrippina, my wife. She was also pregnant when they took her. I don't know what happened to her. Maybe she gave birth in the camp or died. I'll never know. They took my child from me. And now I have a chance. This is my child. It must be mine. I will raise him. I will protect him. I won't let him perish like the others." Ivan looked at Stepan, and his eyes read something more than just anger. He saw his pain, his desperation, but that didn't change the truth. "You don't know who the father is, Stepan. None of us knows. But that doesn't change what you did. And it doesn't make you a father." Anna, sitting up, looked at them both. There were no tears in her eyes, only icy resolve. "Enough. What yours, Stepan? You, who perhaps sold us out to save your own skin. Or you, Ivan, who always looked at me like property, even when others were being torn to pieces." She took a heavy breath, pressing her hands to her stomach. "This child, he doesn't belong to either of you. He is ours. All of ours. All of those who were here, who died, and who remain. He will carry the memory of those who are already gone. And if you fight over him, he will be born in this hell and will curse you all. This is our child, all of ours. Period." Anna's words, steeped in bitterness and the wisdom of despair, silenced the men for a moment. Ivan looked at her. His gaze was full of respect and pain. She had once again taken on an impossible burden, trying to prevent a new slaughter. But Stepan, though quieted, continued to look at her with eyes full of morbid hope and growing obsession. The thought had already taken root in his mind that this child was his only chance for redemption, for the continuation of his line, for the new life he had been deprived of, and he had no intention of giving it up. Several weeks passed. The snow finally covered the taiga, turning it into a white, silent kingdom. Anna was in her 4th month of pregnancy. Her belly began to round, which only intensified the tension between the remaining men. Now, in her every movement, in her every glance, they saw not only her, but also the one who was to be born. And each of them, Ivan and Stepan, fought in his own way for the right to be the father. Ivan, becoming even more gloomy and silent, took on the main responsibility for survival. He went hunting, checked traps, gathered firewood, trying to provide Anna and the future child with at least some semblance of safety. He looked at Anna as the last connection to the past world, as a chance to preserve something human in himself. "You need to take care of yourself, Anna," he would say hoarsely when he saw her working too much. "This child, he is our only hope." But Stepan, who grew more obsessed with the idea of fatherhood every day, gave no peace. He constantly hovered around Anna, trying to help, but his help was intrusive. He would talk to her about the future, about how the three of them, he, Anna, and the child, would live after the war. He increasingly looked at Ivan with open hatred, seeing him as a rival who was laying claim to his family. One day, when Ivan had gone to check the traps, Stepan cornered Anna by the stream where she was getting water. "Anna, listen." His voice was full of despair and determination. "You know it's my child. I feel it, and I want to leave with you. Just the three of us. Somewhere. Somewhere no one will find us, where you will be only mine, and the child will be only ours. We'll forget about him, about Ivan. He's a bad man. He's a traitor, just like me." Anna pulled away from him. Her face turned pale. "What are you saying, Stepan? Ivan is not a traitor, and we can't leave. We agreed. And the child, he is ours, collectively." Stepan grabbed her arm. His eyes burned with madness. "No, not collectively. Mine. And you will be mine. I won't let this child grow up thinking that murderer is his father." He yanked Anna toward him, trying to convince her with force. "We will leave. I'll do anything." Anna struggled desperately. Her heart was pounding. "Let go of me, Stepan. What are you doing?" At that moment, as if from nowhere, Ivan appeared. He had returned early, sensing something was wrong. His eyes narrowed when he saw Stepan grabbing Anna. Rage flared in him like a dry branch in a fire. "What do you think you're doing, Stepan?" he roared. "Have you lost your mind completely?" Stepan let go of Anna and spun around. His eyes showed a mixture of fear and hatred. He realized he was caught. "What, Ivan? You think I don't know you're the same? Think you're the only righteous one here? You're a deserter too, and she's not yours. She doesn't belong to any of us." Before Ivan could say anything, Stepan, like a wild animal, lunged at him, pulling out a knife he always carried in his boot. His eyes were full of madness. He was ready to kill. "I'll kill you," he screamed, swinging. "And Anna and I will leave. This is my child, mine." Ivan, strong and experienced in fights, dodged the first blow. This was not just a fight for life. It was a struggle for the future, for the last hope that Anna and her unborn child represented. He saw only madness in Stepan's eyes and understood he had already crossed the line. The fight by the stream was quick and brutal, like a beastly skirmish. Stepan, blinded by madness and a desperate desire to possess Anna and her child, attacked Ivan with the knife. His movements were wild, uncontrolled, but full of deadly resolve. Ivan, though stronger and more experienced, was forced to defend himself, understanding that he was no longer facing a man, but a cornered animal, ready for anything. Anna, pressed against a tree in horror, watched what was happening. Her pregnant body trembled, and only one thought beat in her head: to stop this madness, but she was powerless. Her scream was stuck in her throat. The fight was short. At one point, Stepan stumbled. Ivan seized that moment. There was a dull thud, and then Stepan fell into the snow. He didn't move. Ivan was breathing heavily. His hands were shaking. He stood over the fallen Stepan. His face was contorted with pain and despair. He hadn't wanted this, but he saw no other way. In the silence, only his heavy breathing and the occasional caw of a crow in the sky could be heard. Ivan slowly approached Anna. His eyes were full of unbearable anguish. He embraced her, trying to calm her, but he himself needed comfort. The two of them stood over Stepan's body, understanding that now there were very few of them left. The next day, Ivan buried Stepan next to Mikhail and Alexei. Now there were only two of them, he and Anna, and the child that was to be born. The taiga around them seemed even more empty and vast. Days turned into weeks. Ivan, feeling the full weight of responsibility, became even more withdrawn. He spoke only when necessary. His thoughts were completely focused on survival and protecting Anna. He would go hunting for long periods, bring back game, butcher it, prepare food. Anna, despite her condition, tried to help as she could, but her strength was fading. On one of those days, when Ivan was checking traps far from the izba, a real storm broke out in the taiga. The wind howled, ripping snow from the trees. The frost intensified. He struggled to make his way back, sensing trouble. When Ivan returned, the izba was cold. Anna was gone. His heart clenched with fear. He rushed outside. His eyes frantically searched for tracks. There, to the side of the path where they usually gathered firewood, he saw signs of a struggle in the snow, torn branches, deep indentations, and nearby lay the axe. The same axe Anna always kept ready for chopping wood. Ivan felt the world around him begin to crumble. He rushed after the tracks, which led into the thicket. But the further he went, the more the terrible realization became clear. There, in the snowy thicket, among the fallen trees, he found Anna. She was unconscious. Her body lay unnaturally, and the snow around was stained. Next to her, a bear cub lay in the snow, caught in one of his traps. Apparently, Anna had gone to check the trap and was caught off guard by the mother bear, protecting her cub. Anna, pregnant, couldn't fight back. Ivan dropped to his knees. His eyes were full of horror and hopelessness. He lifted Anna into his arms. Her body was limp. He carried her back to the izba. His steps were heavy, as if he were carrying the whole world on his shoulders. In the izba, in the cold silence, he tried to do everything he could, but it was too late. Anna gave birth to the child, a small, premature, weak baby boy. But Anna herself, exhausted, weakened, and with injuries, soon faded after the birth. She quietly, without a sound, passed away, leaving Ivan with the newborn infant in his arms. Anna's last breath also carried away the last glimmer in this wild, merciless world. Ivan sat by the fire in the cold and empty izba. On his lap lay a small bundle wrapped in old rags. The infant. The only thing left of Anna, of their entire community, of all those who had found their death in this cursed taiga. Ivan looked at the tiny face, and in his eyes, usually stern and impenetrable, now read boundless despair and a kind of wild, animalistic tenderness. He was alone, completely alone. And in his arms was a tiny, absolutely helpless life, dependent only on him, on the man who had fled the war only to find it within himself. He fed the infant diluted milk from wild goats he had miraculously managed to catch. He pre-chewed grain for him, trying to provide some kind of sustenance. Every cry, every breath from the child resonated within him with a new, unfamiliar responsibility. Days merged into weeks. The taiga around them froze in winter silence. Ivan went hunting, checked traps, but now his movements were even more cautious, even more measured. He could not afford a mistake. The price of a mistake was now too high. He talked to the infant, told him about the forest, about how they would survive. These were his only words in this wilderness. One day, as Ivan sat by the fire, cradling the child, there was a knock at the door. A dull, hesitant knock. Ivan froze. His hand instinctively reached for the axe. He thought they had come for him, that the NKVD had finally tracked him down. The door slowly opened, and on the threshold stood a figure, thin, exhausted, with an overgrown face and wild eyes. It was Alexei. Ivan dropped the axe. Alexei! His voice was hoarse with surprise. Alexei, staggering, entered the izba. He looked like a ghost. His clothes were torn, his face frostbitten. On his chest, under the dirty shirt, the traces of the brand were visible, already healed, but a gruesome scar remained. Ivan, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I survived. They left me to die. I thought you were all dead. I wandered the taiga for a month eating berries, moss. I saw what they did to Mikhail, to you. He saw the infant in Ivan's arms, and his eyes widened in shock, then filled with a new, wild hope. Anna, Ivan shook his head, and pain shot through his gaze. She died. Gave birth to him. Alexei sank to the floor. His body shook. He looked at the child, then at Ivan. So, he's the only one left. The old, naive spark ignited in his eyes. but now it was mixed with a mad determination. It means he's my son. I was always near Anna. This is my child, Ivan. Ivan stood up. His face became stone again. He held the infant like the most precious treasure. Shut your mouth, Alexei. He's not yours, he's ours. Everyone's. Everyone who was here. And now he's mine. Alexei also stood up. His gaze was full of fanaticism. No, you don't understand. I ran from the war to live, to have a future. And this child, this is my future. We have to leave, Ivan. Go to a village. Maybe they'll forgive us. We'll say I'm his father. I'll say it, and we'll live. Ivan shook his head. His voice was full of cold doom. No one will forgive us, Alexei. No one. We are deserters, and they won't forgive us until the war is over, if it ever ends. We lived here, and here we will die free. Silence fell. The last two deserters, two men, each clinging to life in his own way, and to the small infant in whom he saw his only salvation. The taiga, it seemed, held its breath, awaiting their final choice. The following section appears to be a different version of the events, but is included as it was in the original text. Ivan sat by the fire in the cold and empty izba. On his lap lay a small bundle wrapped in old rags, the infant. The only thing left of Anna, of their entire community, of all those who had found their death in this cursed taiga. Ivan looked at the tiny face, and in his eyes, usually stern and impenetrable, now read boundless despair and a kind of wild animalistic tenderness. He was alone, completely alone, and in his arms was a tiny, absolutely helpless life, dependent only on him, on the man who had fled the war only to find it within himself. He fed the infant diluted milk from wild goats he had miraculously managed to catch. He pre-chewed grain for him, trying to provide some kind of sustenance. Every cry, every breath from the child resonated within him with a new, unfamiliar responsibility. Days merged into weeks. The taiga around them froze in winter silence. Ivan went hunting, checked traps, but now his movements were even more cautious, even more measured. He could not afford a mistake. The price of a mistake was now too high. He talked to the infant, told him about the forest, about how they would survive. These were his only words in this wilderness. One day, as Ivan sat by the fire, cradling the child, there was a dull, hesitant knock at the door. Ivan froze. His hand instinctively reached for the axe. He thought they had come for him, that the NKVD had finally tracked him down. The door slowly opened, and on the threshold stood a figure, thin, exhausted, with an overgrown face and wild eyes. He was wearing a torn, dirty uniform, but on his shoulder, a strap was visible that Ivan would recognize out of 1,000. A senior lieutenant of the NKVD. Ivan dropped the axe. The stranger slowly entered. His movements were cautious, and his gaze darted around the izba. He looked like a cornered animal. "Don't shoot," he croaked, raising his hands. I'm not an enemy." Ivan stared at him, not believing his eyes. "Who are you? What do you want here?" The NKVD man sank to the floor. His body was shaking. "I'm Yakov, senior lieutenant, and I'm a deserter, just like you." Ivan gritted his teeth. "What are you talking about, NKVD man? A deserter? Are you mocking us?" Yakov shook his head. His eyes were full of despair. "No! My own men abandoned me. We were on your trail. When the fight started, Grigory distracted them. And then I saw my commander, Major Kovalev, finish off a wounded soldier who was asking for help. One of our own soldiers. Just like that, so as not to bother. I couldn't take it. He ordered me to report that the soldier died in battle, but I refused. For that, he shot me in the arm and said I was a coward, and left me to die in the snow like a dog." Ivan looked at him, and his gaze held disbelief and a deep, terrible wound. He remembered his own story, his anger at the commander who abandoned the wounded. "So you also ran? From your own?" Yakov nodded, his voice becoming firmer. "I crawled for 3 days, eating moss. I saw your tracks. I saw your graves. I understood. I understood that it's no better here than it is out there, at the front. Your own kill your own. And this child, whose is it? Ivan held the infant tighter. Anna's. She died giving birth to him. Yakov looked at the infant, and a strange mixture of fatherly longing and a new predatory calculation glittered in his eyes. A child. That means there is a future. Ivan, listen. I know everything about the NKVD. I know how they think, how they search, and I know how to hide from them. I know the system. The two of us, we can survive and save the child, but only if we work together, and I can raise him. I know how to survive. Ivan was silent. Thoughts swirled in his head. This man, an NKVD officer, a representative of the very system he had fled, but he was wounded, abandoned, and perhaps he knew things that could save them. Or he was even more dangerous than a wild animal. Ivan looked at Yakov, this unexpected guest, this fragment of the system that had ground them all down. In his words, there was a grain of truth, a grain of despair, and a grain of something else that Ivan couldn't understand. Trusting an NKVD man was unthinkable, but what choice was left? He was alone. Why do you want the child? Ivan asked hoarsely. You're just a wolf, like them. Yakov smirked, but there was no mirth in his smile, only bitter pain. A wolf cub, yes, but not a soulless one. I had a wife and son. They died in 37, called enemies of the people. And I served them, thought I was protecting, and they took everything from me. This child, this is my last chance to fix something. He will be my family. Ivan held the infant tighter. His own pain and distrust were reflected in his eyes. He is not your family, and not mine. He is his own person, and he needs to live. And with you, he will be in even more danger. Yakov stood up. His gaze turned hard. What, Sergeant? Have you gone completely mad? You think you'll survive here alone with an infant in your arms? I know what I'm doing. I know how to hide, how to lie, how to kill if necessary. And I will teach him. He will grow up strong. But you will doom him here with your principles. The tension hung in the air. This was not just an argument. It was a clash between two broken men for the last spark of hope. Each saw in the child his own salvation, his redemption, his future. You will not have him, Ivan said quietly but firmly. Never. Yakov, assessing Ivan's determination, suddenly lunged forward like a predator. His movement was fast and unexpected. He tried to snatch the child from Ivan's hands. Give him to me. I know what's best for him, he snarled. A desperate struggle began. Ivan, holding the infant tightly to himself, fought back. This was not a fight for territory, but a battle for a new life. Primal instincts, the protection of offspring, burned in their eyes. They rolled on the floor, colliding with furniture, knocking over utensils. The small bundle with the child was between them, like a fragile shard of peace that they were both desperately trying to hold on to. At one point, when Yakov was distracted, trying to get his knife, Ivan, gathering all his strength, delivered a decisive blow. There was a dull sound, and Yakov froze. His eyes widened, and his body went limp and fell to the floor, motionless. Silence once again consumed the izba. Ivan was breathing heavily. His hands were shaking. He stood over Yakov's body. His face expressed a deep, unbearable exhaustion. The infant in his arms began to cry. Ivan sank to his knees. His strength was gone. He looked at the small, wrinkled face, the last survivor. Of the 5 men who had come to this taiga, only one survived. But in reality, no one survived. Only Ivan remained, carrying in his arms a tiny new life. A last spark of hope in a world that, it seemed, had swallowed them all forever. And he didn't know what to do with this burden. Only the fire burned, and the taiga silently listened to the quiet cry of the infant who would never know his parents except for this silent, broken man.